Today on Newsgirls. The government wants you to have sex. Tokyo launched a government-run dating app that uses AI to match people.
Biggest pro-natalist convention in the world will actually be next month in Austin, Texas.
Can Harry and Meghan make a comeback?
Next week, Netflix is gracing us with yet another show, and we are curious to see whether it's going to be a flop or a hit.
And she's teased a little, but we can expect from As Ever, it's mostly jam.
I think they may have overcommitted themselves, definitely.
And COVID turns 5 at SNL's 50th. The loneliness epidemic going on since COVID hit may not be any worse now than it's been for much of history.
It was like chaos in the Newsgirls world, but I didn't get it, so COVID is real.
Welcome to Newsgirls.
I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel.
Let's get into the stories. Oh, I'm getting a call. Hello? It's the government. They want me to have a child? Okay, just kidding. That wasn't them. But they are trying to get more people to have kids.
As birth rates start to fall around the developed world, governments are taking some pretty drastic actions to try to get people to start a family. So Russia is offering $7,000 to families with more than 2 kids. And Hungary introduced a loan of $30,000 to newlyweds, and the loan is forgiven if they have 3 children.
Yeah, Austria lengthened maternity leave to 2.5 years. Sweden now lets parents transfer parental leave to grandparents. And as of just recently, Spain will now pay single parents the same amount of parental leave as a double parent household.
Authoritarian countries are also cracking down to try to boost birth rates. Like Iran, for example, actually made birth control free in the 90s, but is now limiting access to contraception. And oh my God, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was seen sobbing on national TV, begging the National Conference of Mothers to stop declining birth rates.
저 생각하는 깨끗한 양심이고 청년의 미래를 떠매고 나갈 새 세대들의 대오를 튼튼히 꾸리.
Well, even President Trump just signed an executive order to expand access to IVF. On the campaign trail, he promised insurance companies or the government would cover all IVF expenses, which are usually between $12,000 to $25,000. And he called himself...
I'm the father of IVF, so I want to hear this question.
Even though his supporters are claiming that this is promises made, promises kept.
Guys, it's happening. The president just signed an executive order to help insurance companies pay for IVF. Deserving couples, hardworking families, they wanted nothing more to be parents, but finances stood in their way.
So the order on its own is actually asking for policy recommendations to protect IVF access and reduce costs. And that's kind of it. Like, it doesn't change any existing policy. And that was kind of surprising for people because if you look at all of Trump's executive orders, they were all like drastic, in-depth, sweeping actions. And this one was kind of vague and doesn't have any action.
Well, he's really getting it from all sides because anti-abortion activists are upset because they're really against IVF. But then gay families, which often rely on IVF to have kids, are also upset because the order specifically emphasizes making it easier for loving mothers and fathers to have children.
And critics say that the order is like a PR move and is designed to target the US's declining birth rate. So the order says that the birth rate has been dropping 2% annually for the past decade. And right now, the rate is lower than what's needed to maintain the population size. And that sounds bad, but this is a pattern that we're seeing in progressive countries where people are choosing to not have children.
Yeah, conservatives seem fixed on birth rates right now. Like J.D. Vance has warned of the dangers of the childless left. We all remember childless cat ladies. And Elon Musk is like the poster boy for the pro-natalist movement because he has 13 kids now. And he called low birth rates the biggest danger civilization faces.
And according to Politico, anxieties over these falling birth rates have meshed with fears of rising immigration, which is interesting because technically, if you think about it, opening up borders, letting more people come in, that could raise the population, but some leaders are very against it, like the Hungarian prime minister, who has said that migration for us is surrender.
Well, the most extreme pro-natalists include white supremacists and eugenicists. A speaker at the Natalist Convention said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is probably the single most destructive set of laws in American history and should all be wiped forever. And the Civil Rights Act, of course, outlaws discrimination on the basis of race, religion, sex, and national origin.
Oh my God, so we obviously have to talk about Natal Con, which is the biggest pro-natalist convention in the world, and it'll actually be next month in Austin, Texas. And what they do at these events is bring together the brightest minds in the world to chart roadmaps on how to raise birth rates. And the organization hosts a dinner and a symposium, and it's basically 2 days of talking about collapsing fertility.
So I view this as fundamentally a conservation project. If the Bengal tiger suddenly and dramatically stopped breeding, we wouldn't say, wow, I'm so glad the tigers are prioritizing their mental health. And we certainly wouldn't say, good, there's too many Bengal tigers. Bengal tigers are ruining everything. Instead, we'd look at their environment and try to figure out what changed. What's disrupting their ability to fulfill this most basic imperative? If you're built to do anything at all, you're built to fall in love and have children and raise them. And there's no more punishing verdict. There's no situation in which a person is more psychologically vulnerable than when they take a chance on that. Bottom line, the infrastructure that gets ordinary people educated, employed, paired off, and raising kids has just broken down.
People who have attended say the mission is to build an army of like-minded children who will reject the changes brought by liberal democracy. And it was founded by a conservative Mormon who actually came up with the idea after watching Tucker Carlson's documentary on collapsing testosterone levels.
And Natal Con cites a lot of contributing factors to declining birth rates, like they say sperm counts are historically low, that public schools are indoctrinating children against the good Christian values, and of course that society has convinced women that they can have it all and that they end up, quote, unhappy, infertile, and alone.
So let's get into whether or not these concerns are valid. So the current birth rate in the US is 1.6. Keep in mind replacement rate is 2.1, so the population is shrinking. And having an older population can lead to some issues like lack of caregivers and children to take care of the elderly or increased healthcare demands due to a shortage of doctors and more resources needed.
And according to the World Health Organization, the number of people aged 65 or older will double from the year 2010 to 2050. So there will be nearly 1.5 billion elderly adults on the planet then, which is a lot. And even though at a global level there is no shortage of people, obviously there's more people than ever, drastically low birth rates can lead to problems in individual countries like labor shortages, which is like a really big problem, towns emptying out, even like less innovation.
And there are many reasons why birth rates are falling. More access to contraception and choice, cost of living and childcare is increasing, chemicals are causing infertility, and simply more couples just don't see kids in their life plan.
Which is why a lot of experts in the field say that declining birth rates is a sign of progress in societies. So for people in more affluent countries, having children gets to be this personal choice. Like there is that luxury to make sure you have the right partner and it's the right time and it's something that you really want.
No, it's definitely a sign of advancement for most countries. Like declining infant mortality rates mean you don't need to have as many kids, women being able to pursue career goals beyond raising children, and economies shifting from agricultural businesses, which often rely on offspring, to more like leisure and aspirations.
And it's hard for me to really know where I stand on the issue because it does seem like the world kind of flip-flops on whether we need more people. Like we kind of grew up learning about the dangers of overpopulation and like China's one-child policy. And even now we see countries like India that are dealing with so many people that there isn't the proper infrastructure to support them, and so there's a lack of services.
Well, opinions are very split. Like some people see women having more control over their careers as empowering, and others see it as toxic feminism. Same with heightened contraception and abortion access. Like some see it as liberating, others would literally say it's a sin. Even the rise of the tradwives trend is proof that some people idolize this old-fashioned type of lifestyle and other people like us want to live in cities.
But no matter what side of the debate you're on, birth rates are declining and governments are really prioritizing trying to reverse this trend. So let's take a look at Japan as a case study because their situation is one of the most extreme and what the government is doing over there is seen as one of the most experimental.
So for context, Japan has one of the lowest birth rates in the world at 1.2, and a recent study found that if the birth rate stays where it is now, the whole country will only have one child in 700 years. There's a chilling anecdote about a small village with less than 60 residents, most of them elderly, and they so missed the days when the village was filled with kids running around that they created mannequins depicting children riding bikes and swinging on swing sets, and they placed them around the town. So it's pretty bleak.
That's like really creepy and just sad. And apparently, I mean, Japan has been dealing with this issue since the 1980s. And that's kind of when the government started rolling out what was seen at the time as like crazy policies to increase births, like opening subsidized daycare, paying direct cash allowances for having a child, and so many more. But none of that really seemed to work. So the number of babies born in Japan last year fell to the lowest level since the government started collecting those statistics in 1899.
Well, Tokyo, the world's largest city, is really dire. Their birth rate is even less than 1. So they've gotten creative. Last year, Tokyo launched a government-run dating app that uses AI to match people. Users must be single, over 18, want to get married, and take a diagnostic test about the desired traits of a future partner.
And parts of the application process are pretty standard, like you send in your height and education, your job, and a photo. And then it gets kind of intense. So you have to send in an income certificate, have an interview with an app operator who deems whether you're serious or not, and sign a pledge promising that you're looking for marriage.
They are really not messing around. In addition to the app, Tokyo allows parents with children in grades 1 to 3 to trade off a little bit of their salary for the option to clock out early.
And starting this April, Tokyo is actually going to have a 4-day work week for government employees. And it's basically designed to encourage couples to like relax and take time off, rekindle their romance, and have sex.
Oh, wow. Nothing steamier than a government-sanctioned sex day. But a 4-day work week will also help once the kids come and you need to take care of them.
And experts say that Japan's declining birth rate can partially be blamed on their really intense work culture. They even have a term for death by overwork called karoshi. So maybe these like out-of-the-box initiatives will be helpful because they're not just like blanket policies, here's some money. They're actually focused on targeting a specific cultural issue.
And that's why critics say President Trump's IVF order is more for optics because it doesn't actually address the root of why the population is shrinking, which is more and more people deciding they don't want kids.
The 2% of women that do use IVF, Trump's order falls flat because, again, it just asks for policy recommendations, which we'll actually see 90 days from when the order was passed.
So are birth rates cause for concern? Well, most experts say in the face of climate change, increasing risk of nuclear catastrophe, and risk of AI taking over our jobs, we have bigger things to worry about.
But all these moves by governments around the world spending more money on childcare and new couples and refashioning work culture does help improve the lives of families who already do have children. Next week, Netflix is gracing us with yet another show about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And we are curious to see whether it's going to be a flop or a hit because people's opinions on the royal couple are so split.
The show is called With Love, Meghan, and will apparently present an earthy version of her cooking, gardening, hosting, even beekeeping. Who doesn't? With celebrity friends popping in.
And according to the people who've watched the show already, it focuses on inspiration. So like Meghan is making a strawberry cake, so it should inspire you to make a strawberry cake. Apparently the show has like 0 actual recipes though.
And even though they have a gorgeous home in Montecito, the show was filmed at a friend's house nearby. I guess they want to keep their lives extremely private, but it does kind of hinder the organic feel.
And the show is basically like an offshoot of Meghan's lifestyle brand, which was previously called American Riviera Orchard, but was recently rebranded to As Ever. And to explain the rebrand, Meghan said, American Riviera, that sounds like such a great name. It's my neighborhood, but it limited me to things that were just manufactured and grown in this area.
Yeah, and I guess it's just coincidental that she didn't get the trademark for the name since you can't trademark a geographic area. And she's teased a little, but we can expect from As Ever, it's mostly jam.
Of course there will be fruit preserves. I think we're all clear at this point that jam is my jam.
And cringy inspirational posts like, you cannot make everybody happy. You are not a jar of Nutella. That's fair. And I love you with all my butt. I would say heart, but my butt is bigger.
It hurts. It's painful.
Jokes aside, I do get the point of her rebrand. Like American Riviera Orchard had a teaser last March that showed Meghan wearing like a ball gown and she looked very like royal and unattainable. And now she's presenting a very like laid back California girl image.
Yeah, it feels like she's going for a more relatable goop or something. But there are already some issues with the brand. So the mayor of a small town in Spain says As Ever's logo, which looks like a coat of arms with an X with hummingbirds on the side, is nearly identical to his town's emblem that dates back to 1370. He says residents are upset Meghan is using their coat of arms to sell products around the world.
That's rough. And apparently the name of the brand is also running into some issues. I guess As Ever is an existing clothing brand. And on top of that, apparently the products for As Ever, which we still don't even know what they are, won't be ready until months after the show launches. And according to Page 6, there won't be any like pop-ups or branded cafes or anything, which is a surprising business decision.
It's just so classic them. Like there always seems to be some complication to like every project they take on. Like they had that $20 million Spotify deal to make uplifting content and only managed to put out 12 podcast episodes in 2.5 years.
They also had like 2 Netflix shows that were pretty much flops. So Polo came out in December and is an inside look at professional polo. It had a 25% on Rotten Tomatoes and is a 3 out of 10 on IMDb.
Yikes.
And then Heart of Invictus came out in 2022. And apparently the show had a lot of heart, but there just wasn't really any public interest.
But of course, their docuseries Harry and Meghan was a certified success. It broke Netflix's record for the highest viewing hours of any documentary in a premiere week. And I watched it and I left with a favorable opinion of them. I think they really got the narrative of why they left the royal family across well.
And then they've had some projects that we don't really know how to classify. Like Prince Harry's book Spare came out in 2023 and it became the fastest selling nonfiction book of all time. And in it, he talks about like losing his mother, his drug abuse, his time in the army, and even meeting Meghan. But he was criticized for revealing some like odd details, which kind of like took over what the entire book was about.
Yeah, he talks about getting frostbite on his penis during a charity trek in the North Pole. And then he said he used his mom's fancy skincare on the area. He also describes losing his virginity to a mysterious older woman in a field. Like, Harry, it's TMI.
Yeah, like, is that a win or a flop? We cannot tell with that one. And another example in this like weird category is in 2020, Meghan signed a deal to provide voiceover work for a Disney project in exchange for like a donation for a charity called Elephants Without Borders. But what made the situation embarrassing was that Harry was caught on camera asking Disney CEO Bob Iger to give Meghan the voiceover.
And ultimately, she did end up narrating the Disney Plus documentary Elephant.
The Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. These elephants are setting out on a 1,000-mile round trip, one that could take up to 8 months.
So with this questionable record, I guess everything comes down to with love Meghan. Sources say if the numbers are disappointing, Netflix may drop Harry and Meghan since their contract is up in the fall.
Which says a lot because Netflix is also an investor in Meghan's lifestyle brand as ever. And it's been confirmed that the couple is working on another project for Netflix, which is an adaptation of the romance novel Meet Me at the Lake.
So to analyze why these projects haven't taken off and why public perception is so polarized on Harry and Meghan, we spoke to royal commentator and host of the Off With Their Headlines podcast, Amanda Matta, who has over 1 million followers on TikTok. We know this is a big question, but why do you think public sentiment is so divided on Meghan and Harry?
There's this idea of a royal rift. I think people fall on one side or the other of that debate more because of where they stand on like the issues of monarchy and even politically. With Meghan, it's good business at this point, honestly, if you're in media, to put that spin and get people to click, because generating outrage is a great way to get clicks. And Meghan is somebody who outrages a lot of people. There's just something, I can't put my finger on it, that I don't like. And I'm like, okay, let's unpack that. Is it because she's a woman and like she's in the British royal family and there are all these outdated ideas about what women should be able to do in that family? Is it xenophobia because she's American? Or is it the race issue? There has been so much kind of just thrown at her, like the bullying allegations are coming up again. And I'm just like, show me one like concrete story and I will go along with you. But there is never anything. It's just accusations.
Do you think that they've had a hard time translating their image to the public in like an authentic way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tough making the switch from working royals to non-working royals. Like it's not a thing we see happen very often. People want to know, like, am I getting the real version of Meghan when she's promoting like her brands? And I think no, to a degree, she and Harry both are cultivating like a persona, but so does every celebrity.
Do you think they've done anything to kind of bring it on themselves at all? I know they have this reputation of starting projects and not really seeing them through.
They came out of the gate like full throttle. And I think they may have overcommitted themselves, definitely. You know, these are big names that they were partnering with, and these things were being announced so quickly. Netflix, Spotify, Penguin Random House for these books. And I think that book deal was like 3 books, not just Harry's memoir. They also want to be philanthropists, which is a whole other thing. And I think that work is going really well. But again, there's like mixed messages. Are you royal? Are you not? So, I mean, Harry and Meghan, are they grifters? I don't think so.
Everyone is talking about Meghan's rebrand now from
Yes.
American Riviera Orchard to As Ever. And as you know, she's been getting like a lot of hate for it. So can you kind of like walk us through what are people saying and what do you think is the real like story?
She rebranded from American Riviera Orchard, which I think most people agree was not a great name. It's not very catchy. It doesn't roll off the tongue. We think there's a sense that she was rushed into announcing that because the story got scooped essentially by the British media last year. The word on the street, and my understanding with ARO, is the trademark application process. There was like a bump in the road. It wasn't a full-out rejection. And with Meghan, it seems like the concern was more about, okay, is this name too generic?
So they are notoriously private, but what do we know? What little glimpses do we have of their life with their two little kids in Montecito?
Beyond, you can look at the old real estate listings for their estate or whatever, 16-bedroom mansion in Montecito. They are very private. They have all these famous neighbors, and the community in Montecito, there are conflicting reports about how their neighbors feel about them. Meghan, I think, has talked about how she has like this sanctuary with her family now because the estate has like rose gardens and cliffs, and it's just so beautiful and peaceful, and I love that for her.
There's a lot that they're dealing with that the public doesn't focus on or really know about. And something that we do know is that they're dealing with a lot of legal battles.
Yeah, so currently it's mostly Prince Harry with the legal battles. So I always like when people say, oh my gosh, Meghan's causing all this problem. No, it's actually Harry's the one taking people to court. This one was against the British publishing arm of Rupert Murdoch's empire, publishers of The Sun, essentially. The result of that case was pretty unprecedented. He got a settlement and also an apology, which is kind of I think what he was actually going after for unlawful information gathering directed at not only himself, but also his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, which it's an admission of historical wrongdoing, which is not something you see every day.
And then we understand he has one going on now, still against the publisher of the Daily Mail.
This one is also about unlawful information gathering, but specifically phone hacking. Harry is a co-claimant with people like Elton John, Elizabeth Hurley. This could involve a huge settlement. The trial is currently set for next year, 2026.
And so to end on a little tease of what we can look forward to next week, what are you excited for about With Love, Meghan?
I'm really excited to, make a beautiful crudité along with Meghan.
I'm sure we've all heard the commotion about the loneliness epidemic going on since COVID hit. The UK and Japan appointed loneliness ministers, and the World Health Organization declared loneliness a pressing public health concern.
Yeah, President Biden's Surgeon General even issued a warning about an epidemic of loneliness. It seemed to be this really big, sweeping public sentiment in the years following COVID.
So many people are complaining of feeling lonely, feeling alone, feeling isolated.
It turns out that being alone is not good for us. And we saw, during the pandemic, there was a lot of isolation.
There's a loneliness epidemic in this country, in spite of everybody being on their phones all the time.
Well, according to a study published last month, this whole epidemic might have been overblown. It says a close look at the data indicates that loneliness may not be any worse now than it's been for much of history.
And these findings are especially timely because, believe it or not, we are actually coming up on the 5-year anniversary of COVID, which is crazy. I mean, the first case in the US was January 20th, 2020. And then COVID was officially declared a global health emergency more than a month later on March 11th.
So 5 years ago this time, we were all wondering, will this become a big thing? And unfortunately, we all know how that ended up. But I just can't believe that was half a decade ago.
No, that's crazy. And it's kind of even crazier that it's still around. So the biggest headline we've heard about COVID recently was that there was an outbreak from the SNL 50th anniversary. So Martin Short and Maya Rudolph are confirmed to have caught it.
You want to know what it takes to make a show like this last for 50 years?
And we're sure that you are all sick and tired of hearing about COVID.
But COVID fatigue really hit 2 years ago. So I think a lot of us have been tuning it out for quite a while, but we think there's some important things that you need to know now. So today we're doing a COVID State of the Union.
So on Trump's first day back in office, he signed an executive order mandating that all federal agencies order their employees back into the office full time. The administration then released a more detailed directive to end all remote work arrangements for federal workers.
And this order was met with dismay from federal employees. I read an article interviewing a disabled veteran who's worked for the government for 22 years, who now has to go back to the office full time.
And it's an interesting choice by the Trump administration to require this because reports by the previous administration actually found that hybrid work was the best for productivity, performance, retention, and even cost.
Well, where's Elon then? Because that doesn't sound very efficient. But 55% of workers whose jobs can be done remotely have a hybrid setup, and 32% of workers work fully remotely. And apparently half of workers say they would leave their jobs if they couldn't work remotely anymore. So that's relatable.
That's very relatable. And I guess through COVID, there have been so many advancements to work from home. Like we were working at 60 Minutes when everything hit, and it seemed kind of impossible to be journalists and work fully remote. But then like all of a sudden screenings were happening over Zoom, and we were all using like new software to share footage and edit pieces together.
So it only felt right to do this story remotely too. There were some other unexpected silver linings of COVID, like tipping culture has gone up, especially for delivery drivers. It's now normal to tip 20% because of the risks that were associated with delivery during COVID. And that trend has just kind of stayed.
Yeah, the hospitality and travel industries have just changed so much over the years. Like digital customer service and like online portals have improved so much now than if you think about like 5 years ago, because they're basically essential for most businesses now.
To say the pandemic was politicized is an understatement. Nearly 3/4 of US adults say the pandemic did more to drive the country apart than bring it together. And it's ironic that we can all agree on that.
Yeah, COVID has really exacerbated divisions, maybe because like the stakes of it all were just so high, people couldn't like really agree on anything. Even now, 60% of Democrats worry that we're not taking COVID seriously enough compared to 20% of Republicans.
COVID also drove mistrust in public institutions. So 80% of Republicans say the news media exaggerated the risks, but only 20% of Democrats say that.
And approval ratings of both Trump and Biden kind of suffered during the pandemic. They were around 40%, which is interesting because they had very different approaches.
Okay, why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? As a lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from China.
So please get vaccinated now. It works. It's free. It's never been easier. And it's never been more important.
Well, bad news for women. That's one of my least favorite phrases to say. New NIH research shows that women have a higher risk of developing long COVID because estrogen might play a role. Doctors aren't exactly sure how estrogen impacts the immune system, but older women who have decreased amounts of estrogen are the most at risk of long COVID.
But men apparently have it rough too. So according to the same study, men with long COVID are more likely to experience sexual dysfunction. Yikes. And for context, long COVID is when symptoms are in the body for at least 3 months. And according to the CDC, 8% of US adults reported having long COVID, and 3.5% say that they currently have it.
It's crazy that you don't have to worry about this at all since you've never had it. Mabel, how does it feel to be a novid?
It feels pretty good. Thanks for asking, Wren. I tested, and like I wasn't one of those people who never tested. Like I tested every single time I was slightly sick and never got a positive. But of course, every time I tell people like I never got COVID, they're always like, well, you probably got it and we're like asymptomatic.
And that is possible because 20% of cases, according to doctors, are asymptomatic. But then there's also another theory that maybe you just have these superior COVID fighting genetics.
Well, it makes sense only because neither my brother nor I have ever gotten it. So maybe it is a genetic thing.
Well, one theory is that you have an overactive immune response in your nose, since that's where the virus starts multiplying.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Another theory is the gene HLA is more active in you because that's what alerts the immune cells that there's invading microbes.
I love how you are nerding out on Novid on behalf of me. It's very good. Good friend points.
Well, the last theory is that maybe your T cells, which is the type of white blood cells that attack foreign invaders, are just extremely talented.
It could be any one of these things. All we know is that I've definitely been exposed because obviously we're running around New York all the time. And there's the infamous incident. Shall we tell them, Wren?
Yes, I suppose. So literally the week before Newsgirls was set to launch, Mabel and I were sitting next to each other inches away, sharing a computer, doing
literally
our first,
at your apartment,
doing our first interview ever for the show.
I was telling all my clients to get on Threads.
The next day, I tested positive for COVID.
I was so scared. I remember getting that text from you. It was such a crazy week. Like you said, it was our first episode. I was also a bridesmaid for one of my best friend's weddings, and I was going to fly out a couple days later. So it was chaos in the Newsgirls world, but I didn't get it. So Novid is real. We're going to get into where are we now. So according to infectious disease experts, COVID has gotten milder. So we haven't even seen a super variant since 2021.
Yeah, when I had it a couple months ago, it truly just felt like a mild cold or something. So it makes sense that hospitalizations are 11 times fewer now than they were during peak COVID, and severe symptoms like loss of smell and taste are way less common.
Yeah, and apparently it is still prevalent. Like, experts can trace the disease in wastewater, and they've seen dozens of like sub-variants kind of pop up throughout the years, but like we said, COVID in general is more mild now, and there are a lot of theories as to why. So one is obviously that most people have been like vaccinated and infected so many times that their bodies have a really strong immune memory of the virus, and they can like fight off the infection very quickly.
And viruses often, not always, but often get milder with time because it's advantageous for the virus's survival. I mean, if they make people so sick that they can't go out and mingle with others, or if they kill their human host, that's bad because then they won't continue to spread to other people.
And then lastly, medical experts have studied other coronaviruses throughout history, and they've apparently seen this trend of them becoming milder until they're kind of similar to the cold. So maybe there is some kind of commonality between all coronaviruses and how they settle over time.
Well, no matter the reason, just thank goodness it's milder than it was. And this is shocking, only 4% of Americans wear masks now.
And apparently fewer than half of US adults said that they plan to get the updated COVID vaccine, which the FDA approved in August.
That's not the most comforting development because it seems COVID vaccine skepticism ushered in a newfound wave of general vaccine skepticism. Support for policies requiring vaccines in public schools have fallen 12%, and that's largely driven by Republicans, and that could help contextualize the current measles outbreak right now in Texas that's infected 100 people and 80 of them being kids.
Well, that was kind of a crazy COVID retrospective. Like, so much about the world has just changed forever. And if we've learned anything as a society, it's hopefully to really take public health and the spread of diseases seriously.
And that may be put to the test sooner than any of us would like with this bird flu on the rise. As of last week, it's now endemic in cows, and multiple new variants were detected in dairy cows.
Bird flu also has a 50% death rate in humans, and last month, cattle reportedly got the virus a second time, which is very worrisome because people can potentially just keep getting it and spreading it.
Yeah, also if you don't build any immunity to it after having it. I mean, luckily there haven't been any reports of human-to-human spread so far, but experts say the outbreak is unlikely to end without some kind of intervention. Even one of the leaders of Trump's Operation Warp Speed, which we all remember was his COVID response team, wrote a New York Times op-ed saying he's really concerned about this bird flu.
So we are curious and anxious to see whether Trump can handle it this time around. He just purged a ton of experts at federal agencies, including workers who respond to specifically highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak at the CDC and Department of Agriculture.
And last week, HHS Secretary RFK halted the CDC's seasonal flu vaccination campaigns. And the U.S. has also cut communication with the WHO on influenza data. Well, thanks for tuning in.
Join us next week for our investigation on how satellites help save endangered animals.
Bye.